guys? I'm so excited. I just got back from the Texas Conference for Women. So I want to tell you about that. But I guess rewind to last week. Hi, it's Friday. So last weekend I went and I volunteered at the high school for a conference for girls, which I didn't realize was this whole conference ordeal. I had just signed up to be at this session called Power Chats, where I sat down with, there's five chats, and each one had a question, and so girls would rotate. So ended up sitting down with five different girls and talking to them about career and just answering questions like, how do you think we need to better support girls? And listening to their really well articulated thoughts. And what really shocked me was that the volunteers kept saying, oh, these girls know what they're doing. They're so well put together. They have what they want to do when they grow up mapped out, and I didn't know any of that. But then on the same side, they were telling the girls, don't be stuck in your path that you think right now is the path of what you're going to do the rest of your life. Be open to change and navigating into these different paths, because actually I heard somebody say today, your career is chapters. You have these different chapters, and each chapter you're doing something different, and you can move around within your career path quite a bit. But I was very shocked at how surprised all the volunteers were that these girls they knew what they wanted to do, and they knew where they wanted to apply for school, and they were already thinking about what to put on their resume so they can get accepted to colleges. And some of them were 8th graders, and some of them were seniors in high school. So I think that was the age range, was 8th grade to 12th grade. And I thought, I'm not surprised, you guys. There's a lot of pressure on girls. And I feel like my generation, the millennials, or the Gen Y, we had the same pressures, and we were also on top of it, especially the girls that they come from backgrounds with enough resources to be at a conference for a weekend that is centered around empowering girls. Even though I think it's free for the girls, I'm not quite sure on that. So yeah, that was both eye-opening, and it felt very good to be talking to girls about what I do. And at one point, somebody came up to me for the next chat, and she saw that my name tag said water engineer on it, and she yelled across the gym like, hey, I found the water engineer. And so the girl who came over and talked with me had seen my name on the list and what I did and who I worked for, and she specifically wanted to talk to me about engineering. And then after that, I just got the girls that wanted to talk to the engineer. And actually there's two engineers. The other was an electrical engineer that works with me, and she was the Legacy Jacobs company before CH got bought, so I had never actually met her, even though she works in my office. So I met her, and we were the two engineers, and it was kind of fun to talk about engineering, and I gave them my little business cards for my blog so that they could follow me. And I was talking to my mom later, and she was telling me about how she did a similar event when she was in high school, and how it was so impactful to her that whenever she went to go look at the course catalog and try to figure out, oh, what do I want to be? What type of classes do I want to take? That she actually looked up. There was one woman that she had talked to that was so memorable to her and so impactful that she looked up what that girl did, which was a buyer for fashion at a big department store. And so my mom looked into that career path when she was starting college after high school. So yeah, I did that, but apparently my immune system is not great being in a high school. And really, I only talked to 5 girls, and then we had lunch, which was great. I love being in Austin, and you go to an event that has lunch, and you don't even have to reserve vegan ahead of time. There's just vegan there because they want it to be inclusive, and for you not to be like, hey, I have the difficulties with eating, please let me be inconvenient to all of you guys. So not only was that lunch all vegan, then we did a happy hour for my community, and I live in a condo complex, And that was all vegan stuff too. And so I was like, yay, this is such an Austin thing. And then I go to two events, and they have it catered, and it's vegan friendly, or like the second one was all vegan stuff. So that was kind of cool. But anyway, so I had the power chats and the lunch, and then on Saturday night, actually I went out Saturday night and went to, so near campus they've got like a little ballroom. There's actually a bar, and there's food trailers, and then there's a ballroom. They do weird events there. It was the first time I'd actually been to the ballroom, and it was for Drunk Shakespeare. Actually, it's not quite called Drunk Shakespeare. It's more of an alliteration with S's. But one of the guys gets really drunk, and then everyone else tries to keep the play together. And it was Romeo and Juliet, and so I actually knew like all the scenes in the plot. And it was so funny. And then I stayed out later, and I like started feeling sick, and thought, this is only because like I ate soy for dinner, like a Soylent for dinner, and that was all I had. And then I came and had a beer or whatever. So like on my way home, as I was starting to feel really sick, I grabbed Indian food and came home, and then it turned out I had a stomach bug or something, and like slowly munched on the Indian food for the next 2 days as I was sick in bed. So I didn't get anything done that I needed to get done last weekend, which means this week has been kind of crazy, of just me working from home and then working all the way until like I pass out at 9 p.m. and then sleeping. So I was getting enough sleep, and I was getting extra hours of sleep, but I wasn't doing anything except for working. And then in the evenings, I did turn on Sabrina on Netflix, the new Sabrina, which is good. And then on Thursday, I did end up going into the office and going to see my finance lady and talk to her about benefits. And today was the Texas Conference for Women, which was so inspiring. In the morning, we had a keynote speaker who, there was a couple of them. One of them was a guy who does TED Talks, and he does psychology, and he has a couple books. His name's Shawn Achor. I'll put it in the comments here so that you can see his TED Talk, because I actually really want to go and find his TED Talk now too. And he was hilarious. It was so awesome. And he's talking about happiness and social connectivity, and how we create this ecosystem around us of happy people, and dealing with depression, anxiety, and some of the bigger topics, but approaching it from a psychology standpoint of being happy. And I think he has a book called The Happiness Advantage, which I put in my Goodreads for books to read, as well as there was a panelist lady in the morning who was nominated 30 Under 30. And she's in Austin, actually. And she had said that she liked the book Radical Candor. So you could hear everybody. There's 8,000 women in the conference center, and all of them just like started writing these book names down, which is kind of cool. So yeah, Shawn Achor was really good. And then I went to a panel session that was, how to get to the C-suite, which was a girl who used to work for McKinsey. She was, they called him the thought leader, which is so corporate-y to be using this term thought leadership. But she was the thought leader, and on the panelists, there was a woman who's director of R&D at Phillips 66. There was another woman, I don't quite remember what she does, and then the first NFL female coach, Coach Jen, who's, I am absolutely sure we probably have nothing in common, but I thought she was awesome. It's just like very extroverted personality, cracking jokes. Yeah, she was fun. So they were just asking questions, these panelists, about leadership and about your career path and finding a new career path. And that's where I heard the term chapters for your career path. So I wrote a bunch of notes, and I stood up at the end to ask a question. I didn't get to ask it in front of everybody, which is fine because I was like shaky and nervous because I'm an introvert and I don't do that. But I was going to attempt to ask a question in front of everyone, and I did end up going at the end and talking to Anne, the woman from Phillips 66, who her background's in chemical engineering. And so my question was, we've heard all these podcasts and all this advice about how when you're young in your career to get a lot of experience with breath, that's a weird word, breath, yeah, I think that's it. There's a D in there though, breath. Anyway, so young women are advised to get breath experience and sort of digging into something really deep, and so that you end up having experience through a wide range of business opportunities. So all these profit and loss roles and business roles and operational roles, and having all of that in your toolbox to work with. And they say that that's really impactful for somebody who wants to be in the C-suite. And this comes out of some McKinsey research, and I've heard actually conflicting advice from the Korn Ferry research that was for women who have STEM backgrounds to dig in and use your technical background to gain credibility to then transition over into the C-suite. So the Korn Ferry one is geared a little bit more towards women in STEM, but it is, I guess I see it as a direct conflict of this other side, this other train of thought that is you need to get all these different types of experience instead of digging into your technical background. So I was asking Anne, so I have a background in engineering, and she was a chemical engineer that's now in leadership and director roles. And I was saying, I've gone to school for all these years, and I really like what I do, and if I were to try to transition at some point, if an opportunity came up, I have to transition into a role that is at the expense of this technical role that I really like to do. And so if the opportunity comes up, that's one question, I make the decision then. But me sitting here trying not to be complacent in what I'm doing and looking for steps of where to navigate and where to go and what to do next, in that whole little dance. How do I know when it's time that I should try to make that transition, or if I should try to make that transition when I've got something that I really enjoy doing? And Anne agreed. She said yes. That advice, probably isn't good for somebody who is an engineer and knows that they're really good at the technical stuff, and you should focus on that. She said for her, she knew she had to be real with herself, and she knew that when she was going home, some of her peers were going home and reading a magazine called Hydrocarbons, which I guess was a magazine then. And she was like, no, when I went home, I wanted to read about business, and I wanted to read about other things. So she said she just had to be real with herself and what she actually wanted. And so after that, she had, she had an opportunity to come up to do a communications role, and I guess had a mentor that that was advising her, like, yes, you should take this role, it's a really good opportunity. And I think she said after that she never went back to doing the chemical engineering. And she did make a mention that she is still a chemical engineer, like she has the background, it's still part of her identity, and she didn't give it up completely. She just doesn't do chemical engineering as far as a technology standpoint, but she does use those skills that she learned for chemical engineering into what she's doing now in her director position, which is good. And I had been doing Instagram stories all day long to try to chart this conference and the whole event, and I was saying in my Instagram stories that the problem is I'm just such a sponge for information that I like to read everything. And I could get really into a magazine called Hydrocarbons, even though I know nothing about it. But also really into like these management magazines and stuff. And I sometimes get the Korn Ferry when I'm out business traveling. So, yeah, I am still in confusion about my own career path, and I feel like I will always be in confusion. Even when I am like just about to retire, I will probably still be like, what do I want to do with my life? Maybe it's the millennial in me. So, that was the C-suite panel I went to. What else did I go to? After that, I went to, I was going to go to a book talk, and then I ended up going to another lady session that was geared towards young women, which I guess I'm not considered young women. I think it was more for people who are in high school or an undergrad and haven't had their first career yet, because I had thought it was about, when you feel lost or when you have imposter syndrome, how do you find your path? And I think it was more for how do you find what passions you and what you should study and go after as a career. So it wasn't as useful for me, but there were a bunch of Girl Scouts next to me from San Antonio, and it was a workshop, so we were answering questions, and I had a really good conversation with them about some of the answers to their questions, and about, one of the girls had said that we closed our eyes and we thought about a smell that was our future selves or something like that, and she said a microphone for public speaking or something like that. And she said public speaking gives her energy, like nervous energy, and makes you excited, all the adrenaline. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting, because a lot of people would say public speaking makes me fearful, myself included. But for her, she saw, like, even though she's nervous about it, it gives her energy. And so, we just had some conversations that I thought were really good. And I gave them my blog card at the end. And I could hear as I was walking out there, like, she's a water resources engineer. And I was like, yeah, damn straight I am. So, yeah. Hopefully that was also impactful. But yeah, that was a lot of fun talking to those two. And after that was lunch, which the keynote speakers were Dr. Brene Brown and Reese Witherspoon. So I don't know if you guys have seen Brene Brown's TED Talk. I'll also put that in the comments. She is, I guess she's a researcher in leadership, and she's out of Houston, and her TED Talk is in vulnerability, and it's awesome. Lauren is always telling me how awesome it is, and I think she wrote a book that Lauren had recommended that I read, but she is hilarious, and she knows that leadership is changing, and it's going to change in 5 years, and the type of people that we need as leaders aren't necessarily the type of people who have been leaders in the past. So in the past, it was who climbed the corporate ladder, who had the best connections, and so the people in leadership positions weren't actual true leaders. And she didn't dwell on that quite a bit. She just mentioned it in passing, like, hey, leadership is changing, and then tried to explain to us the skills that we need to be better leaders, which was super helpful. And of course, she did it with funny stories and stuff. And her talk was probably my favorite all day. It was awesome. And so she, I'm trying to remember everything she said. I also have a page of notes of stuff that Brene Brown said. Her big thing was having hard conversations, and you can learn courage, and we need to have hard conversations, things that make us uncomfortable, because otherwise the alternative is not saying anything and then being resentful. And so she had this little funny story about how she got asked to like help with a bake sale at her kid's school, and instead of being like, no, I don't have time right now, I'm sorry, she said yes, and she just like mimed making this brownie batter and talking about how she wished everybody choked on the brownies. She's like, the alternative is being resentful instead of being honest and uncomfortable. And she also talked about blaming other people and had a funny little story about how she had dropped a cup of coffee on herself and somehow had blamed her husband, and he wasn't even in the room or in the house. And I think her biggest point was about how we need to accept failure and teach failure, because the only way you're learning and being innovative and going for new things is if you're failing and learning from it. And so she was saying at her company, they get the new hires and they give them, here are your W-2 forms, here is your benefits package, and okay, here's how you fail. She's like, so it weeds out a few people right there in the beginning, but we realize their values don't line up. So, and she also said that in Silicon Valley, some of the companies have on their performance reviews about failure, like, when was the last time you failed? Okay, if you're not failing at something, then you're not going outside your comfort zone, and you're not trying new things, and what are you doing? You're not progressing. And so she had a lot of funny things to say about failure and how we need to really stay in failure and think. She didn't use the words root cause analysis, but that's what it was. It was, instead of let's figure out how to fix this really quick, let's go and fix it, no, let's make sure that everybody is communicating on what the problem actually was, so that we are fixing the right problem, and understanding what happened and why it happened, because everybody's going to fail. Nobody's doing everything perfect, and so we need to teach kids and teach young people how to fail in order for them to step into this new leadership role. So Brene Brown, I love her. Her TED Talk was so good. Her talk this afternoon was so good. I was like texting Lauren like, oh my god, I love Brene Brown. And then was Reese Witherspoon, and she was interviewed by the anchor for 60 Minutes, a girl who had been in, she'd reported in like Iraq and Afghanistan and a bunch of places. She was a really good interviewer, and Reese Witherspoon was so bubbly. She probably could have just handed her the mic, and Reese Witherspoon would have just talked for an hour. And we weren't allowed to do any photos during Reese Witherspoon's interview, so I don't have any of that on my Instagram. But it was good. I didn't realize that she had helped to lead some of the Time's Up movement and giving a voice to women in Hollywood who are being harassed, and had started her own company because she was getting roles, or she was reading scripts of characters that she thought were flat and not dimensional and weren't representative of women. And I guess that's something she's very passionate about. So she created her own company. And I knew that she had produced or directed or had something to do with Gone Girl, and the reason Gone Girl became a movie, which I think is awesome. And I guess she has some other movies that one was Wild that I haven't seen. I don't see a whole lot of movies, so maybe I'll do that tonight, is download and watch Wild. But yeah, I liked Reese Witherspoon's talk a lot, and she's just so fun to watch talk, and is aging so gracefully that I'm like, I want to be like you when I'm your age. With these like smile lines and like this heart that is so full for like her kids, being involved in her kids' lives, and so real about, she made a comment about her divorce and how hard it was, and like laying on the ground crying for days. And yeah, it was very nice. And then in the afternoon, I went to a professional development seminar on body language, which was okay. I don't know that the lady answered anybody's questions fully, like what they were asking, but one thing I've been noticing lately is how I talk, especially when I'm doing videos like this with you guys. and in more business situations, I'm very expressive, and I'm like moving around. How to like still be expressive, but not be like using my hands when I don't need to be. Like using them in situations where I'm defining something, and where it's helpful for the story or the storytelling, but not using them if it's not helpful. And even when I was listening to Reese Witherspoon talk, I was watching her body language, watching how good she is in front of a camera and in front of all these people, and I thought she must have had a lot of coaching to be that good. So then I went and I saw the body language seminar, and then at the end of the day, there's like a happy hour, but I skipped it and I went to this little panel that Visa put on, interviewing mid-level career people. So everybody was in their mid-level and they were asking them about careers and navigating into this mid-level, like using the transition to be in mid-level. And that was good. And then I left, and here we are, and it's Friday evening, and I've been talking my face off for 26 minutes. So I'm gonna go, probably download Wild, see some Reese Witherspoon movies, and I'll catch you guys next week. Bye!